There's only one Moses and he only had one opinion. How can there be so many opinions of the oral law?
Moshe Rabbeinu had no opinions. That means, except what's written in the Chumash, he was an Eved Hashem. When we say, when we speak about Torah, Tzivalanu Moshe, as far as Torah is concerned, he passed on what Hashem said to him. Hashem dictated him what to write in the Torah, which he wrote down word for word. And he also gave him verbally what the Torah means and how it should be applied. When it says frequently in the Chumash, Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. Now, how is it translated into English? How do you translate that verse, which is mentioned frequently?
He spoke on God spoke to Moses. Saying.
Just a minute. If he spoke unto Moses, that's it. God spoke unto Moses, unto Moshe. So why does it have to say lemor? What do you mean? What's it mean saying? Isn't speaking the same as saying?
It's like to tell though, it's like command.
They're two different words. So what's the difference? But in English they're translated more or less the same. Especially if we frequently interchange, I am speaking, I am saying. Interchange in the English language.
But I think, I'm not sure, but I think when he says that a bear, it's like to speak, to have a conversation, like more, it's like to tell, like, you know, to tell other people, like to, sort of like to command or to inform.
What's lemor?
Lemor is like to tell, to like
saying.
To say, but to say to tell, to say to explain almost.
Saying is translated here as saying.
I know, but translation doesn't really reflect the full meaning of the difference in the words. We should know the Hebrew of the Tanakh, every word has a specific significance. And daber is a different root from amar. What's the difference between them?
Well,
surely you've heard this from me before, some of you.
I don't know if
not from me, you've learned it, so you learn it constantly, yes?
What I'm trying to say is that a bear is like as if I say I'm speaking to you, it's like we're speaking like to a conversation. So they were having a conversation. When I say l'amour, it's like a parent, like, you know, will say something to a child, like, you know, like it's different. It's to tell. It's a different type of conversation that you're having.
Look, I'll start with a witticism. If you want to know, this applies even in English. In English it's true, they're more or less interchangeable. Nevertheless, there's different nuance, different side meanings to the word speaking and the word saying. If you want to, I'll give you a good example of somebody who can speak a lot without saying anything. And that is how many sermons in synagogues are described. When you ask a person, what did the pulpit preacher, what did he say? So, well, he spoke a lot. Well, what did he say? I don't know, he just spoke a lot. Sometimes people speak a lot and you don't really know what they're saying. In other words, saying, even in English, has the extra meaning of not just saying words, which is speaking, when you speak out the words with the mouth, but it means you're giving over a clear thought. Yeah? But even in English you have that. So in Hebrew, the sages say it frequently. Dibur means clear, precise words. And Amar means explanations and thoughts. The thoughts that are expressed by the word. That's the meaning of lemor. Therefore, Dibur is the written word which is written down clearly in the written Torah, where every word is divinely inspired. It came from Hashem. Torah min Hashamayim, which is the present controversy. The people want to call them open orthodoxy and retain the term orthodox where they don't believe the Torah is from heaven. The written Torah, every letter is from heaven. What is Amar? Is the explanation, is the oral tradition. Let's say, it says in the Chumash, give you an example, with Vaydav Hashem Shemor, it's written, with regard to putting on tefillin, wearing tefillin. But all it says in the Chumash doesn't even describe them. The description is what are the tefillin? They're boxes. It doesn't say they're boxes. They're boxes that contain these four passages, and they have to be written in a certain fashion. It's got to be coloured black and so on, all these things. We only know, how do we know them? Halakha Moshe Misina, oral traditions given to Moshe. It says Vaydaber, and then it says, if you want to eat meat, it says Luzzatto, you've got to slaughter it. It doesn't say how to slaughter. So we have the dinim of shchita, which are an oral tradition. It says, for example, you take 4 species for Sukkot, Vaydaber Lemor. What do they look like? We know it from oral tradition. Therefore, what happened was, Hashem said to Moshe, the basis of the oral tradition which comes from Sinai. And that's what we say, Moshe Kibbutz Torah mi Sinai does not refer to the written word, because that was written down by Moshe Rabbeinu at different stages. Not only sin, it carried on till the end of Moshe Rabbeinu's life, Torah Tzivalana Moshe. But the explanation, that's what Moshe also received from Sinai. That's why when it speaks about, in the creation chapter, Vayomer Elohim. What's Vayomer mean? Hashem speaks? No, it means it's Hashem just had to have an intention that there should be creation. That intention, because that's Amar, means the intention, the meaning, the thought. The more we know of creation, the more we see it comes from a divine source. That's part of the Amira of Hashem. Hu Amar Vayehi. He made a decision, and it became a material existence of the universe. So this is the significance of the oral tradition given to Moshe. Now, Moshe gave over, even the man is described, he had to repeat all the oral traditions, first to Aaron, and then Moshe and Aaron would repeat them to the elders, the 70 elders. The 70 elders would teach it to one another. They would learn to go over it again, then teach it to the people. So that was the way in which the oral tradition passed on. And before he died, he gave the head of it, the head of the Sanhedrin, who carried on these traditions, given them to Yeshua and his Sanhedrin. Then it was given over to what are called the Kenim, the judges, and from the judges it went to the prophets, who were involved in continuing the tradition, the oral tradition. And the truth is that it was quite unified, except there were people who opposed Moshe, like Korach. See what happened to him. Korach was, you can say, the first Reform Jew. He didn't want to accept the authority of Moshe Rabbeinu. He said, you heard it, yeah, you heard this from Hashem, so you claim the oral tradition concerning tzitzit, when he said that even the person's wearing a talit made entirely of the sky blue color, so does it need tzitzit? Moshe Rabbeinu said, yes, it still needs tzitzit. So he said, it doesn't make sense. So he challenged it, challenged other things as well. But basically challenged the authority of Moshe, Torah min hashamayim. He did not challenge the written Torah. He challenged the oral tradition. And Korach means a bald patch. In other words, he had to leave the whole tradition of the existence of the Jewish people, because the existence of the Jewish people depends on the continuity not only of the written word but also of oral tradition. And that's why we find even in the course of generations, although the Gentiles, unfortunately to some extent, they did receive indirectly through Septuagint and other sources translations of the written text, but they couldn't absorb the oral tradition. Chazal say also, because B'nai Noach, they're likely to distort it. That's the significant. Some say you're allowed to teach a non-Jew the written text of the Tanakh correctly, but you shouldn't teach him the oral tradition. Because if they'll twist that, then they teach. When the student becomes a ger, that's something else. He doesn't want to become a ger, just wants to learn the Tanakh. You're allowed to, like they say, the Safona, one of the classical commentators on the Chumash, he was a very great scholar in Italy, and he was the teacher of Reuchlin, the time of the Enlightenment. And he taught him the Bible. Of course, Reuchlin made his own investigations also in the oral tradition, but he didn't teach him. He actually had to some extent, they found out about it. The Imperial Enlightenment found out about it, and many of these great scholars, Christian scholars, they really believed very much in the truth of the Jewish traditions. Many of them purified even their concepts of Christianity. It's well known, for example, they found, that's very interesting, it's only been found out more thoroughly recently, that the famous genius of modern of science a few generations ago was Isaac Newton. And Isaac Newton was a great believer in God, and we know he was a very great scientist, and he even describes his appreciation of the creator of the world constantly, but in secret he really felt that Judaism was the correct religion. And they more recently found, I read a few years ago, they found his diary and different things, which he was a real upholder of Judaism and had great criticism on the distortions of Christianity. So this is peak even people didn't become Geret Tzedek. They recognized it. Now, in the course of that, this is the whole point. Why do we have a Mishnah which was written down? It was the oral tradition, because the oral tradition is mentioned the Chumash constantly, that you've got to preserve the Torah, which means you've got to make sure to memorize the oral traditions and pass them on from teacher to student, from parent to child. Shantam levanecha, as we said, dat abam. It said, chitcha veitecha. You've got to speak about what's written in the Chumash together with the explanation. And that has to be taught, and really it should be learned by heart. And for generations, only notes were taken. And even in the time of the Mishnah, there were mainly traditions that were known by heart. And even the style of the Mishnah is such that you should learn it by memory. But today they have the international quizzes for children to know Mishnayos by heart. They're following the ancient way of learning Torah Sheba'al Peh, learn it by heart. But it's obvious that it can happen in the course of generations that it becomes lost, especially when there are enormous persecutions and a worldwide dispersion of Jewish communities all over the world, separated one from the other. Periods when one thought that the tradition had been broken and a generation passes without proper transmission, so doubts begin to arise. The main doubts arose between Hillel and Shammai. Different versions of what are the true traditions. So that's what brought differences of opinion. And it goes on till today. This is already understood in the Chumash. Because the Chumash says like this. In the 70th chapter of Devarim, it says, what happens when in any aspect of Jewish practice you have a doubt? What should you do? So it says you have to have a Sanhedrin of all the greatest sages of the time, and they have to make a decision. What's the right procedure about any mitzvah or any dispute about anything? You don't know what it says even. There'll be an argument. The gates means in your courts, because each city should have its court. Each court, you see, it says difference of opinion, made up of a few sages. It says there, you go after the majority of Sanhedrin, and they decide what should be the practice. So it means the different points of view. That's why you can't have a Sanhedrin or Bet Din where the numbers are even on both sides. You've got to have the ability to have a majority in all cases. In Bet Din Shakul. So therefore, since it's an established fact of life, which is recorded in the Gemara as follows: just like people's faces differ one from the other, so also people's opinions and characters differ one from the other. People look at things from different angles. So when it's not so clear what is the law, there's likely to be divrivot, different of opinion. Then the rule is achrei rab lahat, you got the majority. So the basis of democracy is in the Chumash. But it's not the way democracy works today in most governments. Because democracy is established when it comes to making decisions for the people of Israel on the basis, majority opinion of the greatest saints and scholars of the people. And you have to go according to the scholars you've got today. You can't say, well, you know, we have to go after, we don't have anybody, each one can have his own opinion. No. The greatest scholars of Israel will always, by that means they've got scholars of Torah, they will always have to be right, as much as possible, and there have to be people who've studied whatever is available of the oral tradition. And what has happened? In fact, there are oral traditions that go back thousands of years, and they're going until today. That's how we practice the Torah. The origin in the four species, you can prove that this was practiced, because there are many inscriptions giving us the four species from ancient times. The tefillin, shall it is something amazing. The great archaeologist, Sukenik, and afterwards called himself a different name, he became a minister also in the government. His name as the archaeologist was Sukenik. He was the greatest biblical archaeologist when I was a youngster. And he was the one who directed the excavations in the Bar Kokhba caves, where he found tefillin from the time Bar Kokhba. And he found tefillin which follow the method of Rashi, and tefillin which follow the method of Rabbeinu Tam. You know that's a dispute. Where's the dispute? They say a story, Rabbeinu Tam, as we said, Rabbi Yaakov Tam. I think they call him Rabbeinu Tam because the other grandsons of Rashi were also called Yaakov. So therefore they added Yaakov Ish Tam, that's what's called Rabbeinu Tam, which some of you have come across in Tosfos. He was a very great scholar. And they say the following story. Perhaps some of you have heard it before, but perhaps not everybody. There were great scholars in Alsace, in France. Greatest scholars in halachic matters. So Rashi was writing his kuntras. Rashi is called the kuntras. He was writing notes to explain any difficult phrases in the Gemara. And he was just writing in the Tractate Menachot his notes concerning the passages of Tefillin. And he had his little grandson, Yaakov, on his knees. So the grandson saw an inkwell in which he was writing and knocked it over to blot out the comments of Rashi. When he grew up, he opposed Rashi's opinion of the order of the 4 parshas you put in the tefillin. So they proves this way, it proves that way. That's why some people today they put in both sets of tefillin, 2 sets of tefillin. Rabbeinu Tam and Rashi. The Vilna Gaon did not put on tefillin for Rabbeinu Tam. They asked him why not. It's a safek, who's right? So he said, the majority opinion is according to Rashi, and if I'm going to be strict according to minority opinions, he said I have to put on 64 pairs of tefillin, because there's so many different opinions. So you follow the majority, and that's enough for me. Now, so just give you an example of disputes that can arise. So, in any case, this is why it's so important to recognize, first of all, today we don't have a Sanhedrin. Any talk of a Sanhedrin is just not acceptable by any of the great Gedolim of today. Not an actual Sanhedrin. And the truth is like this. If we would have a Sanhedrin, it would be very, very difficult. Because the Sanhedrin is obligated also to issue sanctions and punishments and so on. And I think it would create enormous wars, internal wars amongst the Jewish people. It's like the Beit HaMikdash. Why? Because you can only have a Sanhedrin if you've got not just an ordinary majority, but almost all Jews who will follow the rules of the Sanhedrin willingly. It's like the Gemara says, even when there was a Sanhedrin, murder became common in one period in Jewish history. They decided they're abolishing capital punishment because it's no longer deterrent, doesn't help. There's too much murder around. That's not the method. You don't get anywhere with it. Even though it was said a Sanhedrin that committed someone to a death sentence once, according to one version, in 70 years, was called a damaging Sanhedrin. Because they always found ways of mitigating punishments. So today, we're not in such a position. It's like the Beit HaMikdash. When can we have the Beit HaMikdash? If all the people are ready to serve Hashem in holiness, and they'll keep to all the laws, they have Beit HaMikdash. But before that, you can't have it. Because it's too holy for us. And I'll tell you this, I also know that of Sri Yehuda Koch, I still had discussions with him. He was, of course, a great follower of his father, and also in addition, he was the one who maximized as much as possible settlement on the West Bank and encouraged his disciples, students, to settle. But he was very much against anyone going on the Temple Mount. Yeah. And I say this specifically, but there's so many followers of Rav Kook. You know, you find they have the widest kippah seruga and long payas. Yeah, and you find them. Perhaps now they're not allowed anymore. Until a few weeks ago, you would find them who were queuing up to go on the Temple Mount, which was very much against his will. But what did he teach them? He taught them that you could only go up the Temple Mount once we are all on a level of sufficient holiness. Even if you find a minority opinion that says we know clearly that this area on the Temple Mount is not the place of Beit HaMikdash, and therefore, as we just learned in the Daf Yomi, therefore, as long as you keep all the laws of going on the Temple Mount, which are very strict, that you mustn't have any form of leather on your shoes. You mustn't go in with money and with many other things. And you if you've had a tumah of any sort, you've got to go to the mikveh first. Otherwise, you're not allowed to go. So he said, even if those people they're doing wrong, and they think their area is definitely not a place where there was the Beit HaMikdash itself, where anybody who goes there says in the Chumash, because we're all impure from contact with the dead, that soul will be cut off from his people, which either means an early death, or according to others means you get no olam haba. Your future life of your soul is cut off from the people. So therefore, you don't really know. And also, what's even worse, as we see today, when Jews who are innocent don't know much Torah, and they see a notice up, they don't always even notice the notice. If they happen to notice it, yeah, I'll tell you, there was a very great saint, one leader of the Babish groups in Yerushalayim, Rav Weber, who especially had a person standing there to warn all Jews that they looked like Jews. Please don't go in here. And look at this notice, but don't notice it. But the notice says that the chief rabbinate forbid Jews to go on the Temple Mount. Even if you're going up to pray, stay outside the Temple Mount. You can pray. So, but he said, if religious Jews, and there are even some small groups of Jews who are not followers of Rav Kook, and also there's people who don't believe so much in the authority of the chief rabbinate, they think they're more from. And they argue with streimels and with a Shalmi dress, and they go up on the Temple Mount. That's even worse. Why is it even worse?
Because people see it.
Because Jews will say, what do you mean this? You can see the religious Jews go up. And I'm not as religious as these. So if they can go up, I'm going to follow them. I want to see what's going upstairs, up there. Yeah?
Maybe they have a buffet.
Which
over
will
there.
be also. And these days, why do I keep repeating it? Because, you know, I spoke about this in the old city. I was there a couple of weeks ago. Said, well, you know, there's a person called Yehuda Glick and so on. So he makes friends with the Muslims on the mountain.
Oh,
Yeah, makes friends with them.
friends with Muslims.
With some of them. So some of them, because he says, you know, let's make peace between one another. The Jews pray here just like the Muslims pray here. And they almost killed him.
Friends with Muslims.
Extremist Muslims there. They're very extreme Muslims.
It's like befriending an alligator.
And people don't know this, but the tour guide who takes people round on the Temple Mount, I think goes on until today, they only permit Muslim tour guides, the Muwak who are in charge of it, Muslim tour guides, to look after the mosque. And he tells them about this mosque. And he tells them the legend, which can't be true, but he says it's true, the truth says it's part of the Muslim faith.
Nice.
That in the life of Muhammad, does say the Quran, he was commanded to go and spread Islam to the most distant mosque in the world. So to get there, Hashem, or God as they understand God, presented him with a horse with wings. And he went to the furthest mosque. That says in the Quran. It doesn't describe where the furthest mosque was. Yeah. And the traditionals say, I think then he was in Mecca, and the furthest mosque was in Medina, and another place. At the extent of his conquest before he died. So he went to the furthest mosque. He wanted to spread Islam all over the world. So, but they say, no, they don't say that version. They've distorted it. The mosque at the end of the world was the mosque on the Temple Mount, which was only built a few hundred years after Muhammad died. So it didn't exist. But they say it did exist. It exists, they claim it existed in the life of Muhammad. Never mentioned, in fact, Jerusalem never mentioned in the Quran. And certainly it does not say his winged horse landed on the Temple Mount. It's a complete lie. But not as bad a lie as the main preacher up there has been saying for many years, I think. At least it's become more public the last year, that he preaches, what do you mean the mosque was here in the time when, just before Muhammad died? The mosque was here, and it was a Muslim place from the beginning of creation. And, you know, they distort history. And there was never a temple here. So it's, you know, so this is just one of the many lies which the Muslims are spreading all over the world, unfortunately. And their constant lies lead to hatred. You see. So anyway, to come back to your question, we understand that the survival of the Jewish people depends on the continuity of keeping the Torah. Because the written Torah, you know, Baruch Hashem has been preserved. And even many of the nations of the world recognize its divinity. But the oral tradition is that which keeps the written tradition in practice. That's the practical application of the continuity of the way of life of the Jewish people and the moral level of the Jewish people is dependent of preserving the sanctity also of the oral tradition, even though the decisions are made according to majority rule. As also applied to the Temple Mount. I mean, the majority rule about Temple Mount is that it is in its full holiness, the place, despite the fact there's a mosque on top. It's still, the place itself, for the Jewish people, is Kadosh. And Kadosh means we've got to reckon it as such a holy place that today we're not even fit to go there, but we should have it in mind. So, and this is also the importance of getting a bit to the roots of learning Gemara, where we have differences of opinion, understanding and linking our minds and stretching our minds to looking at all things in life in an objective manner. Well, that's the essence of the high intelligence which we need to develop amongst all of us to appreciate real truth, also in all moral questions, where it's so easy to be influenced by the nefesh abahamit, the animal soul, instead of the divine soul. So that's why I'm taking Moshe Chaim Luzzatto. Even the fact that he produced this method, even though today we have simplified a bit in our language, but everything's attuned to look at moral issues also objectively, which is more difficult than any other aspect of life. So that's the idea. The chart's still up good. It's a shame for the next year. Yeah. No more questions now.
Leave questions. I took up all the time. I'm very sorry.
So, but important matter.